Assalamu alaikum fam, hope you're doing well. We are in the third article, and it is titled, Whether God is the Same as His Essence or Nature. Very intense topic, very nerdy, let's begin. We proceed thus to the third article. Objection 1. It seems that God is not the same as His essence or nature, for nothing can be in itself, but the substance or nature of God, i.e. the Godhead, is said to be is God. Therefore, it seems that God is not the same as His essence or nature. Now, this is quite tart, right? So you're like, what? By the essence, you would then measure and, begin to come familiar with the attributes of God, and then know the nature of God and what He orders. But let's see what Aquinas replies back with. We can speak of simple things only as though they were like the composite things from which we derive our knowledge. Therefore, in speaking of God, we use concrete nouns to signify His subsistence, because with us only those things subsist which are composite. So notice this. So he's bringing in language here, which is a very important point. Nouns are a person, place, or thing. So we use a noun to signify His subsistence. Quite interesting. Really getting into sort of almost points about language, which you have to wonder, right? Language is a very important mode for us understanding our reality. Now, he is right that a lot of the things in our reality are composite things made of form and matter, and we just established in the previous second article that God does not contain form and matter. So this is fitting right along for us. And we use abstract nouns to signify His simplicity. So here we go, right? We use abstract nouns to signify the simplicity of God, he contends. In saying, therefore, that Godhead or life or the like are in God, we indicate the composite way in which our intellect understands, but not that there is any composite in God. Now, very interesting distinction here. So, we humans use our brains to indicate the composite ways of God so we can understand, but that doesn't then mean that there is therefore any form of composition in God Himself, right? Very unique distinction there. Very unique. Okay. Objection 2. Further, the effect is assimilated to its cause, for every agent produces its like. Now, this is interesting here. So, every agent produces its like. It's true in a way, right? That's how we see our reality. But in created things, the supposititium is not identical with its nature. For a man is not the same as is his humanity. Therefore, God is not the same as His Godhead. Now, that's a far stretch, right? He's saying, humans, men are not always the same as humanity as a whole. Therefore, God in His Godhead is not the same as His Godhead. So he's almost separating it, which you're like, shouldn't do that. But let's see how your boy Aquinas deals with him. The effects of God do not imitate Him perfectly. Now, this is interesting, because this is me as a Muslim, I would say, God is perfect, right? All the attributes of God will show us His His names, His attributes, it's all about His perfection. But I think what Aquinas means here, if we'll be generous to him, is that you'll see the effects, but that's not a perfect representation for God because of our human mind, which looks at the composites within our world, right? But only as far as they are able. And the imitation is here defective. Exactly. Okay, so you follow? The imitation here is defective, therefore we are not seeing the perfect imitations of God through the effects. You follow? Precisely because what is simple and one can only be represented by diverse things, consequently composition is accidental to them, and therefore in this supposititium is not the same as nature. So this is, very good point for us to look at. We can see the effects, but they're not a perfect mirror because it's an imitation. If it's an imitation, it's not the real thing. So there's something here. You can argue from a Catholic perspective, and I as a Muslim would argue, but regardless, he gives us food for thought. On the contrary, it is said that God, that he is life itself, and not only that he is a living thing. I am the way, the truth, and the life. John XIV 6. Now, the relation between Godhead and God is the same as the relation between life and life-giving, life thing. Therefore, God is his very Godhead. Now, this is interesting. Life and life, like giving thing. Life and a living thing. Now, there are some semantics you can play. What is life? What does it really mean to be living? And what is the thing that contains the living, that you measure the life through? That's something very nerdy you can get onto. And if you can do that on a human scale, that they're dealing with matter, form, and composite forms, it'd be harder to do with Godhead, especially from a Catholic perspective, right? But let's follow it further. Let's see how Aquinas answers for us, because he's always very precise. I answer that God is the same as his essence or nature. To understand this, it must be noted that in things composed of matter and form, the nature or essence must differ from the suppositum. So here Aquinas is contending that God is the same as his essence or nature. You know, I would argue as a Muslim, the signs that are around us give us an indication of God's essence. And then by the Sunnah of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, we would then come to see God's nature and what he orders and decrees for us. And what angers him, we will see the effects of, what that is. Remember, anger is something that you get punished by on God's account. So the similitude of effect would be, the relation of what God's nature is. That's what I'd argue. But we'll see further how Aquinas would argue as a Catholic. The nature or essence must differ from the suppositum because the essence or nature connotes only what is included in the definition of the species. Very interesting. So the nature and essence helps define the species. That's interesting. As humanity connotes all that it is included in the definition of man. Very interesting. So I see how he did the inverse there. So that's very telling. So the other guy was like, hey, human is not the same as humanity. And so here he's like, well, to be human is to be part of humanity, and you can't be a human without being included in humanity. So he flipped it on the guy. For it is by this that man is man. So man is man by his categorization and speciation definition with the word humanity, right? Gets back into that language point he meant. And it is that this humanity signifies that, namely, whereby man is man. Now, individual matter, with all the individualing accidents, is not included in the definition of species. So that's interesting. So what's included in the definition of species? And is the individualizing accent included in that individualistic matter? He contends no. For this particular flesh, these bones, this blackness or whiteness, etc., are not included in the definition of man. Very interesting, right? So those attributes, whether you have curly hair, whether you have, green eyes, blue eyes, that's not in the definition of man, right? That's not in the definition of humanity. They're attributes, right? But still, you see what he's doing here? It's very unique. Therefore, this flesh, these bones, and the accidental qualities distinguishing this particular matter are not included in humanity. So particular matter versus that sort of individualizing accidents is part of the individual matter and part of the essence and nature. It's all very interesting the way he's wording this for us. Are not included in humanity, and yet they are included in the thing which is man. Yep, as he's reiterating his point for us. Hence, the thing which is a man has something more in it than his humanity. Right? So the individual contains more within himself than the broader subject thereof. Consequently, humanity and a man are not wholly identical. But humanity is taken to mean the formal part of man, because the principles whereby a thing is defined are regarded as the formal constituent in regard to the individualizing matter. So the formal constituent, individualizing matter. So notice this huge thing of humanity versus the individual human, and the formal part of man versus the thing that is defined. It's very unique the way he's wording this for us, really makes you wonder. So remember, we're examining the essence and nature of God, and remember Aquinas has said that God is the same as his essence or nature, whereas his opponent was like, well, was the Godhead the same as God? You see? So he's getting in, so Godhead and God, man and humanity. Do you see what he's doing? On the other hand, in things not composed of matter and form, in which individuation is not due to individual matter, so remember, God doesn't have, he contends, matter or form. So he doesn't go through the individuation process such as us, right? He's not an individual matter, he is God, right? That is to say, to this matter, the very forms being individualized of themselves, it is necessary. The forms themselves should be subsisting supposita. Therefore, supposistum and nature in them are identified. Since God then is not composed of matter and form, he must be his own Godhead, his own life, and whatever else is thus predicated on him. So did you follow that? Quite brilliant ending. So that's some language similarity there, is like God is self-subsistence. God is his own Godhead. God is his own being, right? And whatever else is included in that, everything is predicated on him, contingent upon him. So he doesn't have to go through this sort of individualization when he comes into the matter and form reality within our dimensions that composite forms have to navigate through, right? So very potent. So that was whether God is the same as his essence and nature, and Aquinas contended that God, yes, he is the same as his essence or nature, and that to understand it, you have to look at composed matter and form, and that will help you to connotate what is included in the definition of our species, and then you know that God is the first, he's the efficient cause. He is totally separate, so the same categories that we are using will be different, right? So very potent example. I hope you enjoyed.